My name's Sasha Pete, and I'm joined by a fantastic individual, none other than the great Chris Ketsakidis. Welcome, Ketsa, to this conversation.
Thank you, Sash. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome. So we've had the pleasure of working together at Western Suburbs when you were a coach there. But tell us, how did you fall in love with our great game?
Wow, geez, going back a long way, Sash. So I was brought up with 5 uncles who obviously were involved with soccer back in the day, coming from Greece and residing in Melbourne. So I had lots of male mentors around me to take me to football matches and soccer matches back in the days growing up. So my love for the game started off watching soccer on TV like most kids at the age of 5, 6, 7 with their fathers. You know, we had EPL matches from England once a week on the ABC, Match of the Day, back then it was called. So we sort of fall in love when we pick a team, and I was lucky enough to fall in love with Liverpool. Okay. And it all started from there.
Half your luck. So they had a bit of success. I'm taking I'm thinking about sort of the 80s, early 80s success.
Well, the 70s, 80s are the Kenny Dalglish and Graham Souness, all those type of players back then. And yeah, I was lucky enough to experience some success in Europe and in England at that time.
And your family. So you're a Melbourne boy. So which teams did you gravitate to? Where your family supported which sides?
Well, born and bred in Northcote, where my father was a mad Heidelberg fan. So growing up, we tagged along at all the Heidelberg matches back in the days when they used to play at the old Fitzroy football ground back in St. George's Road, North Fitzroy, when Jack Riley was goalkeeper back in those days. And then I relocated to Olympic Village.
Yeah. So strong. It's interesting you touched there because you found your way to Heidelberg in your NSL career. So when did you first play formally for a club? Was it at a junior level?
Yes, I started off like most kids at the age of 13 at Northcote City. A couple of my friends said, let's go for a trial down at John Cain. And we were fortunate enough to land at a club that was already in the so-called State League back then. So Northcote City is a very historic Greek club in Melbourne with a rich history. So started playing my junior days there as a under 14s and then under 15s, and I was fortunate enough to develop relatively quickly physically. So I was playing reserves at the age of 15.
Wow.
And my career sort of, and my talents and my hunger to succeed led me to get an opportunity to play my first senior game at the age of 16 at Northcote. So very grateful.
16 years old. It's almost like you think about today, like at the highest level, even like so it was State 1, so that's the equivalent of like NPL 1. Correct. Even just playing reserves as a 15-year-old, because I remember you always big. Were you big as a 15, 16-year-old? Were you?
Correct, yes. Yeah. Okay. I was a bit more physically more mature than a lot of my colleagues and teammates, and which enabled me to sort of stand up to the rigors of the matches, because I was obviously playing with older boys and more physical bodies. And back in those days, Sash, as you know, it was a very physical game, and we have to put up with a lot, and you had to learn quickly to dish it out as well when you could. So it was the only way to survive.
So as a junior, so 13, 14, so you played let's say your adult career at the back, but did you experiment anywhere else on the park as a sort of first learning to play?
Well, I think most of the boys and kids these days want to score goals. We all want to be part of the goal scoring excitement that comes with it. So although I'd say 95% of my time I was playing as a centre back or a left back in my older days, I somehow found my way getting up forward and loved scoring a goal. And till the day I retired, I always set myself a challenge to get on the score sheet as much as I can throughout the year.
That's interesting. I like, because I remember you playing, and I always remember. So there was, I think the sort of two traditional type, if you had to categorize them, so back in that era. So one was that sort of big hard man, and the other one was the quickish defender that could play. And I always put you in that latter category where you could run and tackle, but you could also you could hit a decent pass. And obviously you mentioned that you were able to score up front from set pieces, etc. And I put you in that, not in that first category of rough and tumble, but you still had to mark a lot of quickish forwards. So you were that type of defender that could run with a little bit more modern type of defender, even though in the 80s it was probably limited to that sort of big hard man that would just kick the crap out of somebody.
Correct.
So did you, when you first started playing at Northcote, where did they stick you? Can you remember your first senior game?
I can. I remember a couple of games. I think my first game was at the old Middle Park ground down at South Melbourne. It was against Hellas Hakoah. Mm-hmm. And being a left footer, there weren't many around back in those days that were, I suppose, at my age and capable enough to play at a senior level. So, of course, you play left back or you play left midfield. And I always remember my first game. I did play the first half. I came off in the second half. But I guess the experience is what it was all about. And I think we managed to draw that game. I think Tony Vizina was my coach back in those days. And me and Tony have gone pretty much throughout my career 3 or 4 times that I've played under him. So he's sort of like the first coach that gave me the opportunity, and probably one of the last coach that I played for back in my later career.
That's pretty full on. So how long did you stay at Northcote, like as a senior player?
So as a senior player, 2 years. So from 16 to 18. Mm-hmm. And that's when Heidelberg came into the picture and we transferred over at the age of 18. So I was in year 12 at school.
That's unbelievable. So still in high school, and you're getting a call up to play NSL football. Did that make you popular, like amongst the guys, to say, "Oh yeah, he's going to be playing senior football," or was it?
It was a surreal feeling. Like you're in the mix of doing schoolwork. You know, I wasn't the most brightest at school. I was just a C grade student going through the motions, but I was a very, very sport-minded person. I played AFL at school, cricket, anything that it took for me to participate in sport, I was involved in. So for me and my schoolmates were, obviously a very European-based school back in Northcote High. So there was a lot of kids that played soccer or watched football. So, and they got caught up in my progress and shared the journey with me through my latter years.
Awesome. So why did Heidelberg come knocking? So what was the trigger point?
Well, they were on the lookout for a centre back at that stage. And I do remember some newspaper articles. There was a player, Arthur Xanthopoulos, I think, was playing for South Melbourne at that time. He was an older, more mature player than me. I was sort of like the young rookie up and coming. So they pretty much went my way, thinking Brian Garvey was coach at Heidelberg back then, and Brian was renowned for giving youngsters an opportunity to play and progress. So I was fortunate enough and good enough to get the nod ahead of Arthur.
Okay, so they looked at both of you. They asked both of you to come down?
I only remember the newspapers writing about both were getting looked at, and they were deciding who to go with.
Okay.
So I was fortunate enough they went with me.
Good. Talk to me about some of the names. So it's your first year at Heidelberg. Who are some of the characters more experienced? Because you enter the dressing room with some big names there at Heidelberg.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had Charlie Yankos, Socceroo centre back at that stage, Jeff Oliver, breaking ground as a goalkeeper. Some great history and stories between me and Jeff at Heidelberg as well, which we can share later. We had Theo Solomidis, one of the best captains NSL team can ever see, a mentor to me. like a big brother to me, looked after me from day one. And then some of the younger players that are still got big names, like Peter Talakis, who's had a great career as a player and a coach in the latter years. John Anastasiadis, Johnny A, who went to play in Greece and PAOK and involved now with some of the A-League teams. So there were quite a few personalities and characters. And then Alan Hunter is another one that came later on.
So I was going to say, so like, think about how to learn your trade. You just touched on Theo Salamidis, Alan Hunter, Charlie Yankos. There's a bit of a pedigree there to say this is the standard that we need to uphold to make sure that this back line doesn't cop a goal today, right? So
absolutely. And Jeff Olver was the general. You really had to be on your toes and on your game. Otherwise, you knew about it from Jeff. I'll tell you that now.
So what a belt it was. I remember going to watch Jeff play, obviously, for both Heidelberg when I watched against him, because I supported the other team, and also for the Socceroos. And you could hear him from the stands, like the people be screaming, but his voice just bellowed.
Correct. So there was no excuses. You couldn't hear his instructions, that's for sure.
So obviously, and very demanding too. Like if you did something wrong, he let you know about it.
Absolutely. In a constructive way, of course. Yeah. There's ways and means of going about that. But as you touched on, I went into a side that was a very competitive, winning attitude, winning mentality. So you learn quick, smart, that you've got to be on the ball and on the game at trainings and on match days to keep up the performance and to maintain that level. Otherwise, you get found wanting and you just go by the wayside. Yeah,
yep. And when did it sort of click where you thought, okay, I'm on the fringes here to now I've got the opportunity and I'm a first team player? How long did before that transition?
I think probably for the first part of my first year, I was involved with the youth side. Back in those days, we had youth competitions, and Heidelberg was very fortunate to win the national youth title at Olympic Park back in those days. And it took I think towards nearly halfway through the year, I think Steve Marley was playing left back and he was out through suspension. So the opportunity came up for me to step in as a natural left footer. And we were playing in Brisbane against Brisbane Lions. And that was my first NSL game in Brisbane.
Okay.
So
who were you marking?
Basically,
do you remember the day?
I remember the day. I remember the night before at the hotel room.
Did you have in the midst of somebody? Like back then, they wouldn't have been able to like share one room to yourself. You would have had to be bunked up with somebody.
No, I think from memory I did share with Theo Salamidis.
Okay,
captain, and I do remember the night before and the mornings, breakfasts and lunches and dinners, and you're nervous like any kid would be. And but what stands out to me is you leave winter in Melbourne when it's 10 degrees and you go up to Brisbane and it's 20 degrees, and here you are, you're trying to play your first game and the sun's out. And fortunately for me, we had a very talented side. We came away with a win, and that's all you remember, and that was a good day.
And have you yet turned 18, or you already closed 18?
I'm a March boy, so I was 18 when my first game came about. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Do you remember who you were marking that first day?
Not in Brisbane. No. I remember some very big names at other clubs, but at Brisbane Lions, I don't remember the first game.
All right. So, and you spent a little while at Heidelberg. So, describe to me sort of what was training just as hard as the match day.
It was. Back in those days, obviously, we were semi-professional. We weren't full-blown professionals like they are now. So the 2 nights or 3 nights that we were training, we had to cram in a lot of work, in preparation. So, we trained at the back of the old Olympic Village grandstand, which was not the best of grounds to play on, especially when it rained. It became a mud heap, basically. So, and we tried to get onto the senior ground as often as we could. But training it was very skill orientated, set plays. Your 5v5s and 3v3s that we get grounded into ourselves to sort of perform on match days. But Yeah, but match days were a different kettle of fish. I mean, being part of Heidelberg, a massive Greek club, big Greek community. Obviously, we had our big rival in South Melbourne. That were big derby days that we all look forward to. And I've been very blessed to be, playing a few of those with some good results.
Okay, yeah, and they were like 7, 10, 12,000 people.
Correct,
sort of that realm. And in the small ground, it becomes eerily like any big derby is like it
Absolutely.
becomes
Well,
lively.
back in those days, we had a lot of Melbourne teams that were part of the NSL, and each respectively their communities, whether it be Preston, Melbourne Knights, Brunswick Juventus, or South Melbourne, the crowds were playing in front of 5,000 people, 7,000 people, and the derbies are always attracted 10, 12,000 people, respectively, either at Middle Park or at the Village. And it's a big party atmosphere, a big festival, the families, children, kids come, and, if you get a nice, decent, sunny day, it's just on for young and old. So, and that's just part of football and derbies all around the world.
So you're I remember like you being putting a lot of you put a lot, like I said, as opposed to, let's say, somebody like an Alan Hunter, who also good in the set piece, but that stronger, more settles, stay at the back, make sure he wins the challenge. You'd be that sort of up and down player trying to get forward as well. Would you try and ensure, what was the mindset? You're marking a good forward. Was your mindset, okay, when I win the ball, I'm going to try and get past him as well and try and connect into play, or are you just there to do your job first? So what was the mindset?
Yeah, it just depends on the instructions that you're given from the coach at the time and who you're playing against. If we were playing up against some strong wingers or some fast wingers or some big strikers, we'd probably have a more defensive mindset. But if we were playing with an opposition that had only maybe one forward and stack their midfielders, then you probably have more license to push in midfield and try to link up with our forwards and wingers. But as a defender, you always focus and concentrated to always defend first and then and get yourself forward when you could. I was fortunate enough to play left-sided centre back or left back. And I had some fantastic midfielders and forwards that I can pass the ball to and link up with. So I was very fortunate, But back in those days, you got to remember, Sash, we didn't have a lot of substitutes. There was only like 1 or 2 substitutes maximum. Yeah. No goalkeepers on the bench. So you had a player had to go in goals if God forbid something happened to your goalkeeper. Yeah. So with my love of AFL and my playing AFL at school, I was one of the players that trained with Jeff Olver as a backup goalkeeper if something happened.
Really?
And that came to the fore one game against South Melbourne in the biggest derby we've played in.
Really? Okay. What year is this?
This would have been probably 86 or 87. So I think it was my second year at Heidelberg.
Okay.
We were playing South Melbourne at the Village. I was 10, 12,000 people, and Jeff Olver had sustained a slight shoulder injury the week before against Brunswick Juventus, and came into the game carrying a niggle, and South Melbourne got a whiff of it. So when they found an opportunity in the first half to collide with him, they collided with his shoulder. It was about 10 minutes before the first half. So unfortunately, Richard Miranda got him. I remember that. Richard Miranda got him good and proper, and he couldn't continue. So I had to put the gloves on for the last 10 minutes of the first half and the remainder of the second half.
Okay. So how'd you go?
So history has it, and it's one of the YouTube videos that is shown around, that we ended up winning the game 3-2.
Okay.
I did concede one goal from Stuart Stevenson from 5 yards out, which I nearly saved anyway. But we ended up scoring the last minute of the game to win the game.
Beautiful.
And
did you pull off any good saves?
Oh, we took out a couple of screamers here and there, but nothing. I wasn't really troubled much, to be honest with you. Okay. So all right. It turned out to be a great day, a great memory.
Those are the days that literally the guy rips off the shirt, right, and you put it on, right? So
Basically, the gloves, shirt, everything.
Gloves, everything. You just you take his gloves, you take his shirt, right?
Yeah.
Like you.
And it's an ongoing joke we have with Jeff Oliver now. Every time we see each other, I keep reminding him who's the only player to ever replace Jeff Oliver in a match in goals, and I'm still it.
Brilliant. So that's quite good. And so in those early years at Heidelberg, do you remember scoring any of your goals?
I didn't score many through home and away games. I did score some valuable goals at cup games, cup level, at Olympic Park. Olympic Park and myself had a great affiliation for scoring goals for some reason. Yeah, just happens to be, horses for courses, as they say. So sometimes happened to score a lot of goals against JUST.
Yep,
knocked them out of a couple of cup tournaments. Just some memories.
And that first year, I think you talk about 86. That's when Just had a very good side, right? So I think that 86 side.
86, 87, they had a very good side. They had a great goalkeeper in Ketsakidis. Very hard to score against.
And you sort of we're talking this era. So is that also? It's interesting you get that chance, but was that 86 year where we've got two divisions? So we've got a northern division
and the
southern division.
Yes.
And it's interesting. A lot of young boys made their debut careers because we've effectively got double amount of teams, right? So you've got a northern league in New South Wales and a southern league in Victoria and Queensland and Adelaide, right?
So and Adelaide, correct.
Adelaide, Melbourne, and Brisbane in the Southern League, right?
Yep. Yes.
A little bit obscure. And New South Wales had their own. And then there'd be a playoff in those first couple of years. Yeah, got it. Yeah. So a lot of you're talking about that time. So like let's say you focus and you ended up going to George Cross, but the likes of John Markovsky's, the Paul Trimbolis, lots of young boys got their opportunity in that sort of mid 80s. So it was quite
a great opportunity.
Yeah,
great opportunity. That's why we kept a lot of players in Australia, because we gave them the opportunity to play NSL and they didn't have to go elsewhere looking to play. It's a bit harder these days with the way the A-League is formed. But back in those days, if you were good enough to play, you were given the opportunity. And if you took your chance, you'd be playing.
Yeah. It's interesting. So and you stayed a couple of years at Heidelberg?
Yeah, three seasons at Heidelberg.
Yep.
And then that final year, we got relegated, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And most of the players transferred or got picked up to various clubs. George Cross, John Gardner at the time came knocking at my door wanting to sign me. So we made the move over to Sunshine.
And
George Cross.
So like some of the transfers were quite large. I mean, like you could buy a block of land or a car for the same transfer. I mean, people put prices on people's heads and it stopped. It stopped careers sometimes progressing. So talk to me. So do you remember what the transfer fee was from?
I remember the conversation George Cross was having with Heidelberg to sign me was $9,000 back
money.
Then. And I know George Cross were playing a home game on that Sunday, and they needed a big crowd, a big turnout to raise some funds to pay for that transfer. So lucky for me, it all went well and we managed to complete the transfer and I made my way over to Sunshine, George Cross.
Yeah, I mean, saying that like for that money, you buy a block of land like in the western suburbs of Melbourne easily, right? So, interesting. Okay, so but still not enough. The wages that you're making, is it enough to sustain a young family or your lifestyle, or do you have to work as well?
You had to work, Sash, back in those days. Unfortunately, we played in the wrong era. I wish I was playing these days.
Yeah,
with some of the money that's been thrown around at Div 2, Div 3 and Div 4. Yeah. But they were the days, and that's the way the league was set up. We had to have our our full-time work, and soccer was a part-time profession back in those days, unless you went overseas and played fully professional.
And did you try? How did you keep yourself fit outside of the 2-3 days? What was your training?
Absolutely. Well, me being a sportsman, loving my sport, so tennis was one of the sports I maintained off season and throughout the year to play and have fun and keep fit. I had a couple of friends that were decent tennis players, and every opportunity we got, we'd play. And I'd use that as my fitness to maintain, and then did any other soccer work that I needed to do on my own or with friends, and the rest was that training.
Okay. And so are you still living in Northcote and then travelling to George Cross, or what's happened? Where are you in your life now?
Yeah, still living in Northcote and commuting to Sunshine George Cross, the old Chaplain Reserve back in those days. So we did that for a couple of years before they moved to Skinner Reserve to play there. So Chaplain Reserve, a great small ground. The Sunshine George Cross crowd, the Maltese community are really passionate people. They love their soccer, football, and really get behind the teams that they follow. And as you said, I played with some fantastic names, back in those days. And the opposition teams from Sydney carried some big strikers, and we had to front up, and we had to, given the responsibility to mark these players,
So now what's happened is obviously Heidelberg's got relegated. There's the reformation of one national league, right? So, and George Cross is part of that framework. You've submitted your position in a first 11. Who are some of the characters now? So what are some of the names in the side of the George Cross team?
Oh, look, we had one of the strikers, Ozzy Latif.
Quality.
So quality powerhouse, workhorse, run all day, strong as an ox.
And nippy too, right? So
very nippy. Wouldn't put up with anything from defenders and gave them hell. At the back we had Sean Part and John Waddell.
Okay, that's what I call that sort of traditional, like kick the crap out of whoever's there. Just Waddell would come in, Part and boom, right? So that's a tough back line, right? So
it's a tough back line, yes. And the midfielders had some famous names. I was lucky enough to play with Donnie McLaren, whose son Jamie now with Melbourne City.
Yeah. So Don could play too, right? So he was quite
absolutely
a good player.
We had some Jeff Faulkner, another midfielder who could run all day. Talented ball players, and back in those days, we'd also bring players from overseas, from Ireland or Scotland, to help out as guest players.
Chris Taylor also in that team.
Chris Taylor, Chris Taylor, resident right back. Pretty much main right back for a while there. Chris Taylor, who again later my career, I played under him at Green Gully when he was coaching.
Okay, yeah. So it's I would call that George Cross side an honour side. So if you had to,
workman's honour side. Yeah, we're all about honesty, giving the best you can.
Yeah,
and not leaving anything in the dressing rooms. And that's what John Gardner demanded. That's what the supporters demanded. Yeah, and what we demanded from each one of us. So we all knew what we had to do. We tried to do it the best we can. We weren't the most celebrated, popular teams in the NSL.
Yeah. The likes of Marconi would be that glamour side.
Yeah, the Marconis.
And the George Cross would be an honest working man side. Did you get any good results? You remember getting some ones you thought, okay, it's going to be tough today, but you just went out there and smacked them?
Oh, look, we surprised the likes of South Melbourne at home at time. I think one of my first games, we won 4-1, I think, and and they couldn't take the loss. It was not a custom for them. They weren't used to losing in that manner. But we were capable on any day of causing damage. And unfortunately, or fortunately, for 3 years we were able to avoid relegation.
Yes.
We tried to accumulate some talented young players, which we did. Unfortunately, at my last year with George Cross, we got relegated as well. So with arguably one of the most talented young sides any team can have. You know, some of the names like Lawrence Kidner, Ernie Tapai, Damien Morey, Paul Foster, Craig Foster, just to name a few.
David Clarkson. Now you're calling out
all of them. Most of them have had a stint somewhere along the lines, and yet maybe we were too young and a bit naive to sustain it. With a bit of bad luck as well, didn't help. But unfortunately, that final year that I was there, we got relegated.
Got it. So you got that the final year you're there, you sort of youngish boys, but that sort of first year you're there, you got a lot of, you know, Brett Scotts. It was a lot of
season campaigners. Season campaigners. So it was like sort of that Anglo-Celtic background. Absolutely.
Anglo-Celtic coach. Was beer a big like if you won a game, did everybody get on the howler?
Yeah, beer was a big part of. I wasn't a big drinker. I'm still not a big drinker, but beer was a big part of the celebration drinks. Whether you're traveling interstate or at the airport, or back home celebrating with the supporters, beer was a staple part of the celebrations.
Rehydration was like 4x.
It's a bit different now, but back in those days, that was the rehab.
I could imagine like a 4-1 win over South Melbourne back in the rooms at Chaplin, that little
sheds. That was sheds.
Yeah. So the clubhouse is really quite intimate, and Chaplin had this grass on it that is quite moist. So either there could be periods that it was quite luscious, right, or a bog house. You know, and so depending on what type of year it was, whether the ground was looking really plush underfoot, right? And I've played on that pitch a number of times as a junior and
I think that may have had to do with a broken pipe that was under the ground that wasn't fixed for about 10 years, Sash. I think there was always wet and moist on certain flanks of the ground, so we'd avoid that with the plate.
If it was wet, like you could like slide, but then there'd be like, it'd get to a point, obviously, because the limited ground use, it would become like a mud pit, right? So there were times there. I remember watching back on, did you wear molds or did you wear studs to hold?
You'd have to wear studs. You'd have to wear the good old fashioned studs. So, yeah. And you knew some of these tackles that were flying in, you knew all about the studs.
Oh yes, yeah. Any ever get drawn blood from a? No,
I was fortunate enough to not be on the end of any tackles, or that might have been me jumping over and hurdling some of them. But
okay. What about back in that era? Like there would have been plenty of elbows being thrown. You know,
absolutely
going headers. So
Ever
cop an elbow or throw an elbow?
I won't mention what I threw, but I have received a broken nose and played, I think it was George Cross versus West Adelaide Hallis in a survival match, the last game of the season at Skinner Reserve.
Okay.
I think with about 15, 20 minutes to go, we needed to win to survive, and they needed to win to survive.
Oh, wow.
And I was marking a player by the name of Billy Wright.
Oh.
It was renowned for being a bit aggressive, and went up for a header, and when I came down, I realised this nose doesn't feel right here. So blood's pouring out. So I'm playing with a sponge back in those days. So I played the last 15 minutes holding a sponge to my nose, and we ended up winning the game.
Okay, so you survived relegation.
So we survived relegation. So, yeah, I couldn't be part of the celebrations because I was off to hospital straight after. So
the nose looks good. I didn't know you broke it.
The nose looks good. It's broken still, but luckily enough, it's not bad to stop me from breathing. So it's okay.
And back in those days, you could have a shirt full of blood. It's like play on.
It's play on. There's no blood rule back then, Sash. So it was play on.
Yeah. Funny thing. So, and what about that notion is like one of your teammates got like seriously clipped, right? Like maybe it was late or whatever. How soon after would it be the next tackle that person would get rammed through, or would it be calculating?
I think pretty much back in those days, every team had 2 or 3 players that
enforcers
were pretty hard hard nuts, hard soul, hard tacklers.
Mm.
And we're a pretty tight knit team back in those days, or most of the teams were. So we looked out for each other.
Mm.
If one of our players was, bullied or targeted, we'd make a mental note of who it was, and we'd be fair and hard really at the ball. But there were times that people would go and retaliate in certain manners, or whether it was straight away, or whether it was round 2 or home and away, whenever it was, or the next year.
Like, there's no way if some of the challenges, like I go back, watch those footage, let's say late 80s, right? Now I remember watching a South Melbourne George Cross game, late 80s, back on YouTube. Some of the challenges, like in a spate of 10 minutes, right? Today there'd be 3 red cards.
Oh,
right?
That's in the first half minimum.
Yeah.
No way you can do that now.
Yeah, you can't. It's become a lot more sanitized, let's say. Yeah. And it was just part of the game, I suppose. You just, like, it was normal, right?
It was.
Yeah,
it was
normal. If you think back, let's say, who were some of the strikers that you thought, okay, today's going to be a big jewel? Because you got some big names. Go through them.
Oh, look, as an 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, playing centre back, left back, some of the strikers I was given the responsibility of marking: Graham Arnold, Frank Farina, John Kuzmina, Nesteski at Marconi. They were just huge people, huge players to come up against, big reputations, Socceroo players. A lot of them have gone on to coach Australia in their careers.
So you talk about that Sydney, let's say that Sydney Croatia side, let's say that late 80s, you got
Apia Leichhardt, with Graham Arnold was.
Yeah.
John Kuzmina, I think, was playing at Sydney Hakala early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he went on to play elsewhere. Frank Farina at Marconi's, and Nesteski at Marconi. Paul Trimboli, South Melbourne. One of the most popular strikers in Melbourne.
And so you marked Trimboli a couple of times?
Yeah, pretty much most of the South Melbourne George Cross derbies. I was marking him.
And the way you would handle, let's say, Zlatko Nesevsky or Paul Trimboli, who are that like crafty, if you're careful, if you're not careful, you're nutmegged, versus that big, strong type like an Arnold or a Kuzmina. You'd have to adjust the way you play these players, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Each of their strikers and respectively had strengths.
Yeah.
The likes of Nesteski and Trimboli were shorter, nimble, more strikers. Arnold, Farina, Robbie Slater, Kuzmina were more agile strikers, tough strikers. So I had to try to incorporate some of my AFL skills, body-to-body combat, to counteract some of these taller strikers, the more robust strikers. And the likes of Trimboli, Nesteski, you probably had to sort of be a bit more trying to read their play, or trying to anticipate more often and try to get the ball before they got the ball and nip in front of them to try to get a tackle in. So you had to adjust week in, week out. None of the strikers were all similar. So you're constantly changing your game tactics and style up depending on who you're up against weekly.
Yeah, the beautiful thing is, against those faster players, like, you could run with them. So that's what I was talking about, that modern, I
don't know if I was the fastest striker. I may have read the play better than most.
Okay.
So I was probably more deceptively faster.
Okay.
And I could slide tackle and get myself into positions to win the ball.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't classify myself as one of the fastest centre backs or left backs going. Yeah. But I did have that capability of reading the game and the play and position myself to make it look like that I was comfortable.
All right, got it. Talking about you touched on like away trips and who you roomed with. You remember any like good memories? Like, if you can think back of a good memory, like an away trip.
Yeah,
maybe it was an incident or win, a story that you could share.
There's only one that really comes to mind, and that was at George Cross in one of my first or second years. we had a young player. We were travelling to Sydney, and one of the 16-year-olds up-and-coming players making his debut was a player called Kevin Muscat.
Okay.
And Kevin was obviously thrown in the deep end with that environment of going out hard and tackling hard and asserting himself at training. So we were fortunate enough to share a room together in Sydney, and the night before, Kevin made it aware that he was a bit nervous and didn't know what to do when and if he came on the next day. And basically, I just said to him, Kevin, just do what you do at training, just come on and kick the shit out of everyone. Unfortunately, that set him off in his career. So I don't know if I'm to blame for that, but I do apologise, Kevin.
Yeah. So what a tough guy. So even as a you're saying 16, 17-year-old, he was tough.
Yeah, he was a tough player, tough tackler. A desire to win every ball. Hated to lose. So, which is what you needed back then to succeed.
Obviously gone on to, again, you the amount of people you've touched on, like these are Socceroos and then accomplished people in the game. So a lot of interesting characters. So, and then from George Cross, where did you end up playing? You went back into the state leagues, or did you ever have an opportunity to go overseas? Did you ever?
The last year when we got relegated at George Cross was at an age, I think 23, about to turn 24. I was fortunate enough to be offered a trial in Greece.
Okay.
To trial out as a professional with PAOK in Salonika. My father had a contact there who was involved with the club, and we managed to send over some video tapes and cassettes and managed to get a trial. And I went over to Greece, and Johnny Anastasiadis, an ex-teammate of mine at Heidelberg, was already embedded in the team there. So managed to play a few practice matches. It was halfway through their season. So I managed to play a few practice matches, trained every day with them. Everything was going well. Unfortunately for me, it didn't work out to get a professional contract through my manager at the time, not doing the right thing by me, as it turned out to be, as we found out. So I guess it's just one of those hard luck stories for me.
Did you feel comfortable, though, at that level? Did you feel like you could play, like you were at the level?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. If anything, I might have been a bit too rough for that league. Yeah. But that was only for what I was used to playing here in Australia. So we're just a bit more physical nation back then. We had to be physical to compete with the Europeans. But although I was physical, I was also able to adapt and to sort of, step back a bit and was comfortable in the position that I was playing, the training, the matches, the practice matches. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out.
So what was it, that the transfer fee was too high, or what was the basic reason?
No, my transfer fee from George Cross to anywhere in the world back in those days was $15,000 Australian.
So that would have been a bargain for PAOK back then.
For any European team, that was just a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, unknown to me, my manager at the time was asking for 50,000 Australian dollars.
Got it. So that's the reason.
So that was a bit too high for a team to pay for somebody who's not really established as a Socceroo or an Australian-based player. They weren't prepared to pay that. But I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes until we found out later when I came back to Australia.
Got it. All right. So the deal would have got done at 15, but not at 50. It's as simple as that.
Correct.
They'll just take a local Greek boy instead of an Aussie Greek boy, and use one of their. Would you been classified as because of your heritage, a Greek-based player, or would have you had to play as a foreigner?
I would have been a foreigner, but I believe after the 3 months I would have had to cross the border and then come back in. Otherwise, I think I would have been drafted into the army back then.
Got it. So, but still a good experience to know that you
absolutely. It was a fantastic experience, and no regrets whatsoever, because I did it. I tried, and I knew within myself that I was more than capable of competing. So I have no regrets.
We're talking about what, 94 now? 90? What years?
91.
91. All right. So your likes of Johnny A's there, Chris Kalantzis.
At Olympiakos, Yep.
Yeah, these Greek Australians are also
Jim Patikas.
Jimmy Patikas
from Sydney. Yep.
Yeah, are all playing in the Greek league. Yeah.
Yep.
And you're also talking about other Socceroos. You're in good company. So you come back to Australia, and who do you play for?
So come back to Australia, and then we're obviously George Cross is relegated. So I landed at St Albans Dynamo. Tony Vrizina had taken over the coaching position there, and they wanted me to come in and play for them in the Premier League. Again, they had to break a record transfer fee and pay $12,000 to get me over. But I went to St Albans, a very strong side, very passionate Croatian background team, played alongside top name players and very competitive, winning natured players. Had a great 4 seasons there.
Okay, yeah. Some of the characters.
Played alongside Vladovanis as a sweeper. Tommy and Oli Pondeljak.
Yep.
Just to name a few that went on to play National League and A-League back then too. Yeah. But again, St Albans was, we managed to play finals a couple of times. Unfortunately, one of the years I got injured against George Cross in the elimination final, first 15 minutes. I strained knee ligaments.
Okay.
I had to come off, so we lost that game 4-0. So we didn't progress, but had a good 3.5, 4 seasons there, and then we moved on.
Okay. And so from there, you went to, was it Gully after that, or no?
No, I had I got invited to as a player coach at Caulfield City.
Okay.
Caulfield City, I think, were playing in the State 1 or 2 back then, and they were struggling, and they needed a bit of help to try to avoid relegation. So I went down to help and try to, and we avoided relegation. Then I was made player coach at the halfway mark. So did a player coach scenario there. And then once we survived, the following year, I transferred to Gully.
Okay. All right. So that's you had so that's your first delving into coaching. And so it's quite
player coach at Caulfield City.
Yeah. Which it probably couldn't work today, but your first time where you get to pick your 11 and set a playing style and okay. And Gully, how many years at Gully?
So Gully was a great 3 years. Unfortunately, sadly, my career got stopped because of a niggling lower back injury. But when I signed, Chris Taylor was coach at that stage, and we had some good players at Gully. And so I had 3 seasons at Green Gully before I retired my playing days. And
then did you move into coaching?
I had 6 months off just to have a bit of a break. And I missed the game so much, being part of it from, 13, 14 to about 31 years old. It's a big part of your life. So I took a back step for about 6 months or 9 months. And so on. I said, I really missed the game. I've got so much experience, and why not sort of give it back and try to develop some young players, go through the ranks like I did, and give something back to the game. So I put my hat in the ring at a few clubs and was fortunate enough and blessed to land at Green Gully with arguably, in my opinion, one of the best mentors and coaches that I've coached with in Ian Dobson.
Got it. And so you were his assistant?
So I got the position.
Did the 21s there, didn't you?
Or I got the position as head coach under 21s and assistant coach to the senior team. So it was a dual position. And and the reason why we had so much success those 4 years that I was coaching with Ian, we had 2 runners-up premierships and 2 premierships in both the reserves and the seniors.
Yeah.
Or the under 21s, it was called then. We had a very similar mindset and game plan, game style that we wanted to play. So it just flowed. We just flowed. Our training schedules, our matches, our whatever the reserves or under 21s were playing, he wanted to play as well. So it was a natural progression that any players that I developed to go into the senior team and know exactly what was demanded of him.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was having a conversation about this. So many number twos, assistant, or you're coaching the reserves, have a distinct, separate model, philosophy, game style, game plan to the head coach. And then they wonder why when somebody says, you must play these 4 players today and make sure they get 90 minutes. They don't understand the patterns. They don't understand the flow. It's a different formation. And this is common. I'm talking about like now at, say, at NPL level, right? I don't know about A-League, but I know, let's say, multiple NPL 1, 2, 3 teams where the number 2 coach, coaching the 21s or the reserves or whatever you want to call it, plays a completely different style, formation, game plan to the senior coach, and then wonders why there's conflict. Right?
Correct.
It's like pick the coach that you know you can work with, or adapt your style to play his style, because at the end of the day, you're there to support the first team, right?
Yep. And
you're saying that just you just by chance that you agreed with Dobbo?
It's when we both got our respective positions and we had a meeting and we spoke about pre-season and how we want to play, we both sort of connected and clicked straight away, because we both had, without knowing each other's game styles, we both had similar styles to start with, what we wanted to bring to the table. It just happened to be that he was the senior coach with that plan and I was the assistant coach, reserve coach, with a similar idea set. So we went about trying to recruit players, trialists, both in the senior level and under 21s, who were capable of playing in those positions and the system that we wanted to play. And we recruited astutely and correctly to give us the results that we wanted to achieve.
So what year is this? This is
90, 98, 99, 2000, 2001 era, those 4 years, that era.
And then was it, a lot of success. Was it from there you came to Western Suburbs?
Yep. So basically those 4 years were my apprenticeship at senior at coaching level, and was lucky enough that Jimmy Condilis, an old Western Suburbs stalwart, big supporter of mine, came knocking on the door and needed a coach. And I think you were there at the time. And I spoke to Ian, and he goes, "You're ready to go to do a senior role." And Western Suburbs, another big Greek club in the State 1 side, always renowned, finishing in the top 5. Historic.
I would say we're honest, humble club, right? Honest club, honest sort of the perennial mid-table.
The perennial mid-table, never get relegated.
So long as we don't get relegated, we're doing all right this year. You know what I mean?
That was it. So I took the opportunity, jumped at the opportunity to come down and coach, and I had 2 or 3 of the best years that I can remember.
I absolutely love that time at Suburbs. So when you were coaching there, so obviously that's my local club. I work elsewhere, at George Cross or whatever. But if somebody asks me who's your club, it's Western Suburbs. I go there. But this is how this interview came up. I was refereeing your boy, who's actually quite a good player. I rate him, so he's playing at Yarraville now in the reserves.
Correct.
Trying to get a shot in the first team, and that's how this interview came up. I really liked the way you played your football. So defensively sound, but you attacked aggressively. Often used wide areas, got the ball behind the byline, and finished. I remember you would score, like, it wouldn't be uncommon. It would be 5 minutes in the game, and you were up 1-0. It was so refreshing that you decided to play the minute the whistle went, right?
Yep. You
look to attack, right? Ball out wide, cut it back. It reminded me, if anyone's listening, that Adelaide City style of play, like that Zoran Matic philosophy of how to attack. sort of get the ball out wide, then cut it back, and players running in, finishing very easily, right? It was that was that how Dobbo played? Because is that
Dobbo was probably one of the first coaches we both were to install the 3-5-2 system with the wing backs playing out wide. So we specifically looked for players and athletes who had the engine to do that running up and down and was skillful enough to get crosses in as well. But we were also flexible. We weren't just limited to just playing that sort of system. We were, flexible enough to change the system after 5 or 10 minutes, depending on who we were playing and how they lined up. So we had to adjust back in those days. And I think one of the things that I learned working under Ian Dobson was to do that at state level, where, again, I remember our first pre-season training at Suburbs. I rocked up and there were 7 players. And I said to myself, well, this is going to be a very challenging 12 weeks of pre-season. And then it was only to my knowledge, you told me some of these senior boys don't rock up to the last 4 weeks of this pre-season. So, but we were very fortunate enough, we were able to recruit some loan players from Gully. We had the flexibility and the alliance to be able to get some of the up-and-coming fringe players that weren't playing to get some valuable game time with us at Suburbs, which helped us a lot in what we nearly achieved.
I think that first year, I think we went to Heidelberg and we were like, we needed to win that last game to get promoted. And I think we ended up, we drawed or we lost, and we really hammered them. Like,
it was an amazing fortnight that first year where we found ourselves in a position to get promoted.
Yes.
Which was the first time in the history of the club.
How's that? Right? How's that? 7 start of pre-season, no one's at training, and the last week, literally, I remember you throwing players on. We're going back now 20 years, but you throwing players on to win the game. And it was like, if you talked about a boxer, 2 boxers, we had Heidelberg on the ropes. We battering them the last 15 minutes. And I didn't think we got the result.
We came a draw.
And then we lost out on goal difference or something to get.
How it was a funny chain of events. Like the week before, it all started from the week before when we were playing at home against Kingston.
Okay.
And we were sitting, I think, 3rd at the time, with a goal difference of -8 from second. You got to understand that division at that time was one of the strongest state 1 divisions in the history. We had Oakley Cannons, Heidelberg, us, and I think another team in there that was like A-League standard or NPL standard. Anyway, we needed to win by a big margin against Kingston, and we did win 8-0. So we got our we got our difference. We got our goal difference up to even with Heidelberg, which sent us to the last game where basically Oakley was already promoted. They were way ahead.
Yeah.
So Heidelberg was second and we were third. We needed to win. They needed to win. And Knox City was lurking behind us, sitting 4th.
Yeah.
So as history has it, we drew with Heidelberg.
Yeah.
But Knox City beat Northcote City and bypassed both of us to jump to second and get promoted.
Is that what happened? There you go. Anyway, I remember what a great first year. Well, anyway, that's our connection at Western Suburbs, old Ralph Street, that one pitch humble ground. It's still the same. So pretty much the same people there. I'm still humbled to be there. And it's great that you were part of our history there at that club. So, but you went on to coach a number of other clubs after that too, right?
Yes, after Western Suburbs, I stopped the senior role, but I did come back and do the under-21s for a year, just to try to promote and try to get some players up to senior level to try to get a chance for the club to promote a few players. And then the following year after that, I also had a stint at another Greek club at Yarraville for a year and a half, just to try to survive relegation again and see if we can keep them in Div 2 or 3 at that stage. I can't remember. Unfortunately, I don't think we succeeded. In in staying up. But yeah, and I think after that, just with work caught up and our work-life balance sort of just got too much, and we had a bit of a break.
But you coach your boys too. I remember you coached.
Yeah, my boys grew up playing for Essendon Royals in Green Gully.
Yeah, okay.
So I had a under 16s stint at Essendon Royals, under 18 stint at Green Gully with their youth team. Again, just to try to get as much players promoted to the under 21s as possible. And now my boys are playing respectively at Yarraville and at Epping in Div 4 in the seniors there. So they're progressing, and I'm getting a lot of enjoyment just watching the boys progress through their career.
Yeah, awesome. So when you look back, Ketsa, and you had to, let's say, if you had to relive, let's say, a moment, either probably in your playing career, because I mean we only coach now because we can't play anymore. But if you had to relive a moment in your playing career, where does your mind take you back?
Playing wise, look, I don't regret anything. I've been fortunate and blessed to have the career that I've had. It's one of the most pleasurable journeys an athlete can experience when they're playing, starting off at the grassroots, and you see the fruits of fruition of what your parents sacrificed to taking you to trainings, you know, in those cold winter nights, giving you the opportunity to play at a high level. The success and the trials and tribulations, so to speak, of playing at various clubs with so many different characters and personalities, they're lifelong memories and life conversations that you have of when you see each other back at soccer pitches and reunions and so forth. So I wouldn't change anything, to be honest with you, Sash. I'm just grateful for the experiences that I was given, and I'm just hopeful that my boys can experience something similar.
Awesome. Yeah, great words. And obviously you've coached many youngish players, so trying to make that transition. So, and you speak to the advice that you give your boys, but there'd be many boys that you would have coached. So on that fringe, playing in that second team and trying to break into the first team, right? So if you had to give advice, so speaking to that 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old boy or girl, what advice can you give them in that period to make sure that they get themselves up to the level to get an opportunity and then take it? What do you tell them?
One of the common things that I've told various players at different clubs that I've played, especially the young boys, is always play and train like it's your last match and training session. Players get injured at training or at matches and have career-threatening injuries. So every time you get an opportunity to play, you play as if it's your last game. You've got to have the hunger, the desire, the enthusiasm to train and improve your weaknesses, improve your strengths, and live and breathe soccer and football. Study the superstars on TV. Read up on what they're doing at training. Just study the best players you can, best mentors, but have that hunger and passion. Because if you don't have the hunger and passion, when it comes to the nitty-gritty, hard things to do, you won't do them. You'll take the easy way out. You've got to push yourself through adversity. You've got to ride the good times and the bad times, but you've got to have a focus and a goal, and always work at achieving your goal and have a purpose. That's what I tell my young players.
And it's sort of that attitude that sort of, hard work pays off. Is that the...
Absolutely. Hard work was, you could be the most talented athlete going around, but if you're not prepared to do the hard yards, you're just going to be another average player.
Fantastic words of wisdom, Ketsa. The hour's flown. Thank you so much for your contribution to Australian football.
A pleasure. Thank you.
You're one of the gentlemen of the game here in Victoria. Somebody who's made the most of their footballing career, and every time I speak about you to others, they've got nothing but good words to say. So thank you so much for being a gentleman of the game. And
Thank you.
it's an absolute honor that I got to share a number of years working alongside you at Suburbs, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you for the opportunity, Sasha. It's been a pleasure.
Hey guys, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our wonderful guest. If you like this type of content and would like to see more, how about you hit the like and subscribe button? And have a fantastic day.